We are live, please start.
A very good morning to one and all. On behalf of the Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development at Impact and Policy Research Institute, Terry School of Advanced Studies, and India Water Portal, I welcome you to episode 10 of the State of the Environment, #Planet Talks with me, Simi Mehta. Water is an indispensable resource on which the entire living ecosystem depends and also flourishes. However, the 21st century has drawn our attention to acute scarcity vis-a-vis rising demand for water in many regions of India and across the world. This mismatch is often seen in lesser developed countries, which often exacerbates poverty and related challenges. Amid such a scenario, we are also aware that around 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, and yet water crises have engulfed the planet. Water insecurity in terms of availability, accessibility, and affordability has become embossed, and we see how water wars have created conflicts and disputes between people, states, and countries. As such, this points out to the need for effective, fair, and just governance of available water resources. The overriding question that remains to be answered is who gets what water, when, and how, and who has the right to water and related services and their benefits. To delve into these and also provide a detailed understanding on water governance, challenges, and way forward, we have with us Mr. Himanshu Thakkar, coordinator of South Asia Network on Dams, Rivers, and People. He is a trained engineer from IIT Mumbai and has been associated with water sector issues for over 3 decades, including with the Narmada Bachao Andolan, the World Commission on Dams, the Center for Science and Environment, etc. in the past. I am pleased and privileged to invite Mr. Thakkar to make his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's a privilege to be invited by this group of organizations. Thank you very much. And this is a very important subject close to the heart. Water challenges, water governance challenges, and the way forward. Can you see the screen?
Not yet, sir. Not yet.
Okay, yeah, now
Yes.
you can see.
Yes, it's coming. Can we see this? Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So water governance, yeah, challenges and the way forward. I'll begin with a story actually. This actually in many ways encapsulates the situation of water governance in India. This is the story of earlier this year when this photo shows that police people are in a village, a tribal village, where the people were protesting. What were they protesting? The tribals were protesting felling of forest. Partly because it was happening without regulatory institute, permission of the regulatory institutes like the Anu Taluka Environment Protection Agency, the Gram Sabhas of the affected villages, whose forest rights were getting violated, and around 50 villages, village panchayats, and they were opposing felling of the trees. Now the trees were to be felled for setting up infrastructure for water, supply water for urban areas. A few 100 million liters per day of water from Dhamni Dam and a pickup via downstream was to be taken to the villages, to the urban areas. And the organization that was protesting is Surya Bachao Sangharsh Samiti. The dam authorities have promised that the dam was constructed 3 decades ago, and before it was constructed, the tribals were promised irrigation, which has still not happened. So that was one of the reasons they were protesting, that you are calling, you have surplus water, But you have surplus water because you have not built the canals which you are supposed to build for provide irrigation to the tribals. And now using that LAB of surplus water, you are trying to transfer our right, water which is our right to urban areas, and at the same time creating more problems for us in terms of tree felling. The urban areas for which this water was going were, typical Indian urban areas where they are actually very high rainfall areas. They were not harvesting the rain. They were not protecting their local water systems. They were not treating or recycling the sewage. They were not doing demand side management, addressing governance issues, and so on, which were actually better options. But every city goes for easy option. The easy option is supply side option. Just give us more water from wherever you can. And even the Ministry of Environment and Forest, which is supposed to protect the environment, wanted to actually dissolution of that regulatory agency set up by the Supreme Court of India. And it had not even set up the chair of that committee. So this is actually encapsulates a lot of elements of governance and problems of governance problem with India's water sector. Most of us, you would not have heard of this issue. And that's also media problem. And the judiciary is already there. So all the elements are practically there. So this is the context actually. So this uh, issue with all the elements which are there is a context which is in Dahanu Taluka, Palghar district of Maharashtra, uh, which was declared ecologically sensitive area by the Supreme Court in 1991. And these are the elements which will there in all the areas wherever there are problems and conflicts in governance in water sector. So governance needs, we need to highlight certain key aspects of the, if you want to achieve right governance. The first aspect is comprehensive policy that will acknowledge what is the resource reality of water issues. What are the fundamental governance values and framework for governance? The policy will also follow with accompanied by an action plan, which will lead to implementation of the policy. Then we need a resource literacy. We need to understand where does our water come from, what are the sources, main basic sources, and what are our water blessings. And then we need to have institutions in line with the policies and resources that we have. So some of the components of this governance will include the governance of rain, urban water, governance of flood, disaster, reservoirs, groundwater, fisheries, sand. Sand is very important part of the river and the whole ecosystem, water ecosystem. Water pollution, governance of sewage, governance of environment, governance of river basin, which is different from governance of river actually, governance of conflict, and most importantly, the governance of now. Firstly, we need to so understand what are India's water blessings. Actually, India is really a blessed country in terms of water. India has so many blessings. Our rivers are our blessings. Groundwater aquifers, very decentralized
Mr. Himanshu, we just lost you for a bit.
Can you hear us, sir?
I think we have lost his connection.
But it's showing here. Yes. Now, can you hear us, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
The last.
Yes, the beginning of the slide of India's water blessings.
Blessings, yeah. Okay. So India has a very large number of water blessings. The rivers, our rivers are major blessings. We have all kinds of rivers from perennial to seasonal, from Himalayan to peninsular. We have groundwater aquifers, decentralized source of water, decentralized major storage, naturally available storage system of water, the wetlands, the local water system, the forests, the Himalayas in the north, western and eastern Ghats, the fertile soils, traditional water wisdom, both in terms of technologies and management systems. And of course, our monsoons. They come right on time, almost every year, like a clockwork. But unfortunately, if we look at our governance system, there is no acknowledgement of this blessing in the first place. And then if you need to acknowledge them and value them, that seems to be absent. Typically, water availability, whenever people talk about, they talk about at the macro level. So many cubic meters of water available, and if it goes down to certain level and so on. So this is typically a macro level. But the problem is water is firstly and essentially a local resource. The basic resource is local, the demands are local. So it has to be, the governance has to start at the local level and then go up. If we start with the macro level, then we will be coming to wrong prescriptions, which is typically happening. So, if we say that, okay, we need so many millions or billions cubic meters of water, so we need big projects. That's the fallacy. We have to start from the local level. There is a general acknowledgement that India's water sector is in turbulence, and we are actually meandering along largely because of the groundwater, which has actually helped us out in a major way. This was also part of the conclusion of the World Bank's, for example, 2006 report, which is actually titled India's Turbulent Water Future. And this is actually generally accepted. Maharashtra is a symbol of the crisis in many senses, which has the largest number of big dams, it has the largest sugar production, but it is also one of the lowest percentage irrigation area in the country. It has the worst droughts, and in last couple of years, in 2018, 19, and even this year, it had one of the bad floods. So in many different senses, Maharashtra typifies water governance is challenges of India. So basic challenge is that we have enough water. The challenge is to make it available in the form, in the quantity, in the quality, where and where is required, and particularly justifiable needs. It can't be, not all needs cannot be weighed equally. There are needs, and then we need to differentiate between the needs. And the management challenge, I have already said, will divide into number of components, and I'll try and go into each of them. And of course, we have to remember that climate change is complicating all of this in a very big way, because climate change is operating mainly through water systems. So the first challenge, governance issue, is having a reliable water information. Even officials accept that, even Mirsha committee, government Ministry of Water Resources appointed committee, has accepted that question of having right kind of quality, information, is a big problem in India. And I think this is emanating basically because of the kind of systems we have, institutional system. The main body at the central level, which is in charge of collecting most information, is Central Water Commission. But the Central Water Commission is plagued by large number of conflict of interest issue. It is, it's doing all kinds of things. It's a regulator, it's an informational gatherer, it's also monitoring, it's also financial agency, it's also designing, it's also approving. So, there is a lot of issues with respect to that institute. What we need is a different institution, for example, on the lines of USGS. Now, what is the role of the USGS and water sector essentially? Is they collect information on daily basis, whether it is of river flow, whether it is rainfall, whether it is groundwater, whether it is quality, and put all of it promptly next day in public domain. The key is that USGS has no role in water resource development. It's only involved in gathering information and putting out. So its a mark of excellence is the quality of information, reliability of information that it puts out. That's not the case with the Central Water Commission. Central Water Commission sometimes has to ensure that the information that it puts out is in line with the projects that it is pushing. And that's the conflict, basic conflict of interest coming in. Many times you will find doctored information on water sector, which is, increase, and there is very unreliability of information. Even IIT professors have told me that they reviewed officially the information gathering system of CWC, and they find it very seriously problematic, reliability of that information. And of course, India is well known for keeping the water information secret. I mean, water information cannot be secret. So this is about the information. And there's, of course, a lot of information gap as to how much water we really have. And remember, we need to have this not just at the national level. We need to start from the watershed to go up to the basin level and then national level. How much water we are using totally and from different sectors in different seasons in different areas. Where does the water that we use come from? Where does it go, etc.? How much comes from surface water, groundwater, rainfall? What are the interactions between groundwater, surface water, rainfall? How climate change is changing all that? Now, all of this is a part of reliable research and development of information in water sector. The second issue is a key issue is the storage. Actually, it's true that we are a monsoon-driven country where most of our water comes in 3 or 4 monsoon months, mostly southwest monsoon and part of the South India and northeast monsoon. Now, we need to ensure that the water rainfall that we get in those 4 years remains available for rest of the year for different uses. And so we need to store the water. Now, that's the logic so far, the science so far is very correct. But the next step they take is very important. What are the options available for us to store the water? Now there, the Central Water Commission straight away jumps from this macro picture that we need to store so much water from saying that, okay, we need so many big dams. Now that's a big problem because we have very large number of storage options, and if we neglect them, then we are going to do it at our own peril. Now, some of the storage options include, for example, local water systems, our groundwater aquifer, which is actually the most benign storage option. There are no social impacts of storing water in groundwater. There are no environmental impacts. And there are actually no costs. It's a naturally available storage system. Soil moisture is even more important because most of our water goes for agriculture. And for agriculture, the most important water availability is where the roots are, and that's in the soil. So more capacity the soil has to hold water, more soil, more water we have in the soil, more water it is, we are able to use. And so, this is soil water is a very important source of water. There have been a lot of protests for unjustified projects, some of justifiably, some of them so. And there is also flood management is a very important issue. All floods are not disasters. So we need to so flood management is a very important part of the water governance. And there are a number of components of that. One of the important components of flood management, for example, is reservoir management. Now we have a very large number of reservoirs. Now those reservoirs have been created, dams basically. They've been created at a huge cost, economic cost, social cost, environmental cost, and we need to optimally use them. That's one part of the reservoir management issue. The second part is that during the flood season, we need to ensure that this reservoir, which can actually help us moderate floods, and that is a very important component, because if you don't do that, then what we are ending up doing is that we actually, reservoirs, if they are not operated properly, they end up creating additional flood disaster in downstream area. And that's a very important second component of reservoir management in India. And there are many other components. I'm not going into detail here. Disaster management is another important part of the water management. River management. Now that's an additional important part of the which will include the pollution management, the flow management, the biodiversity management, and number of different things. Because the rivers are actually lifelines, India's lifelines. But what we are doing to rivers in terms of the number of infrastructure projects where we are building without really understanding the nature of the river and their impacts. Ganga, has in last decade or so has acquired a, additional importance in water governance in India. But we still far away from how we manage to how we need to manage our rivers. Similarly, the rivers actually meet the sea in the delta. And what happens at the delta management is also very important. The dams not only stop water from reaching the delta, the dams also, very importantly, stop and stop the sediment flow. And the sediment doesn't, if it doesn't reach the delta, then there's the fight that at the delta the rivers have with the salinity ingress and the sea. It defeats the purpose of the fights. The river is no longer able to fight that. So sinking of delta is a major issue that happens because of the dams management. The dam building that we do. Catchment management is very important. How do we manage the catchment actually decides the water flow in the river and how much water will reach the reservoirs also. Agriculture management is very important. For example, if more than 80% of the water we use is getting used in agriculture, if we don't use right kind of cropping pattern, then our water demand is going to create, actually that water demand at wrong cropping pattern is going to create major problem, which is already happening in Maharashtra, in Punjab, in Ganga basin, and so many different places. Northern Karnataka, parts of Tamil Nadu in Kaveri basin. So agriculture management is very important. Groundwater lifeline, this is the most important issue in my view, because we need to realize today that most of the water that India uses today comes from groundwater. Government's own figures say that about 85% of the rural domestic water supply comes from groundwater. More than 2/3 of irrigation water, irrigated area gets water from groundwater. In fact, in last 4 decades, 90% of the additional irrigated area has come from groundwater sources. If you look at the urban water supply and percentage of what coming from groundwater, each of the subsectors that is going up and up.
Sir, we lost you.
It's a reality for last 4 decades. Hello.
Sir,
Yeah.
we lost you for last 1 minute. You can
Yes, when you were talking about the percentage of how much water comes from, if you could just repeat the previous few lines. So are you there?
some issue. Now it seems yes.
Okay.
We can see you, sir. Yes, now. Yes, please
Okay.
go ahead, sir. No issue.
Okay, I'll restart. Yeah. So if you look at the percentage of water that we get from groundwater in each of our subsectors, whether it is rural domestic water supply, whether it's irrigation, whether it is or industrial water supply, each subsector, the graph is going up. And that's the reality we need to be very careful about. And groundwater has been our water lifeline for at least 4 decades, because most of the additional water in last 4 decades has been coming from groundwater. Of course, the situation of groundwater is pretty bad in terms of the aquifers water level going down, quality of water level going down, deteriorating, and so on. But then we are not really doing anything governance of groundwater. So groundwater governance is the most important aspect in our water governance today. And that should start by acknowledging that groundwater is India's water lifeline, and we need to protect that water lifeline more than any other subsector of water sector in India. So this is just to show you a graph of how many area irrigated by groundwater is going up. Uh, Urban water is another major issue. Urban water sector is having the footprint of urban water sector is increasing in various different ways. However, urban water sector is operating in almost complete policy vacuum. We don't have a urban water policy. We have a national water policy which has very little attention to urban water. We have been saying for some years now that India urgently needs a national urban water policy, which will define, for example, among other things, how the urban water will be managed and what is a urban water management. What is an example of that? We don't have that today. We have a smart city program, but no water smart city program actually. How urban water needs to be managed is a totally different. They need to first ensure the resources available locally, acknowledge them, use them to the optimal level, and also ensure that there is a demand side management, there is a recycling and reuse of the sewage. And increasingly the world is changing its urban water management. The world is going more and more towards what they call cities which actually absorb water, more and more water within the city, rainwater. And they also go for what they call room for the river. So these are the new concepts that are coming in for urban water issue. Water quality and pollution management. We have institutions like CPCB and state pollution control boards, and they have been in existence now for 46 years, since 1974 when the Water Pollution Act came in. I have been looking for a success story where any of these institutions have achieved a clean water stream in India. One success story. I haven't been able to find one success story where, because of this, we have mega institutions with such huge bureaucracies, so much money being spent. We are very powerful institutions, but where is the success? There is no success, because the way these pollution control mechanism function, there is a serious problem in that. Environment management is a larger framework within which pollution will be one part, but there will be many other parts. Then we have to look at the institutions, as I said in the beginning, that what kind of institutions we have and what kind of institutions we really need in ensuring the kind of water governance challenge we have. So these are the key governance challenges, I say. And as I said in the beginning, climate change is complicating this whole situation. Most importantly, it's changing the rainfall pattern in a big way. And changing rainfall pattern demands a change in governance, the way we deal with rainwater. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir. Please go.
Yes, yes.
There are, of course, hopes. I started with talking about the blessings. And there are, of course, a lot of hopes. And there are a lot of young generation is coming forward for protection of environment, for protection of water sources. World Commission on Dams was a great sign of hope, actually. It provided a framework for decision making, for taking the right decisions, whether it is hydropower projects or dams or water in general. There is a movement for river, room for river, and the sponge cities, what I described, that cities which absorb the water, sponge cities. But if we want to change, we will need to change it, do a lot, actually, a lot of things. If you want to improve the state of water governance in India, we need to start by changing the institutional framework and the kind of institutions we have. If we don't do that, I'm not sure our blessings are going to help us for a long time. Thank you. I've skipped a lot of the material that I didn't have time for, but we can go into it if there are questions specifically.
Sure. Sure. Thank you very much, sir, for your very precise and very updated presentation. And actually, you've drawn our attention to very critical issues, and that is actually, which is actually important for the entire survival, so to say, of the ecosystem, living ecosystem. And you have also pointed out how the governance has to be bottom up, and for which it actually draws my understanding to the whole decentralization of water policy. So you mentioned about urban water policy. There's a need for urban water policy. Uh, do you think uh, uh, we should rather have a policy which is oriented towards the rural areas, and then move to the urban areas, or if just an urban water policy would suffice, and if yes, why, and should, because the entire discourse on water has been very city centric, especially when we are talking about smart cities, and you pointed out that we do not have water smart cities. Still, we are seeing that the majority of the challenges that are coming or being associated with water woes are in the urban areas. What are your views on this, sir?
So I think firstly, we need to understand that
Hmm.
the urban water footprint is increasing, is actually become very large, and in so many different ways. One is that, of course, the amount of water that it demands. That's one part of the footprint. The second part of footprint is what are the impacts of these. If it says that it needs so much water, and when you source that water, mainly it is sourced from big dams, then what are the impacts of that? So the second level of impact. The third level of impact is then it creates a lot of sewage.
Hmm.
About 85% of the water it uses gets converted into sewage. And the sewage, no city in India is treating its sewage. And that release of sewage creates the third level of impact in the downstream areas.
Hmm.
Then there are
Hmm.
other impacts. For example, city needs a lot of sand. Now the sand again comes from surrounding rivers, and that has impact on the rivers in turn, or water bodies. Then it takes, it needs, for example, it takes a lot of groundwater. Tanker supply is there, and that tanker supply then again depends on the groundwater from surrounding areas. So if you look at that, there are generations, several levels of impacts of urban water area,
Hmm.
and there are increasing. Urbanization is increasing. So what we need in the, and then, if you look at, for example, Delhi, so Delhi suffers air pollution because of the stubble burning, but Delhi is also creating air pollution of its own. Now, so the focus is only on the stubble burning. Stubble burning is, of course, a problem that needs to be tackled. But Delhi's own vehicular problem emission also needs to be tackled. So, I mean, and this then has impact on water sector, because the stubble burning, if you look at its genesis, it started by Punjab and Haryana promulgating laws that the paddy transplantation cannot happen before 10th June, the summer paddy transplantation. Now that then led to a problem in the wheat paddy cycle, and then they didn't have time for time between their crops, and they started burning. So there are a lot of connections with the water. Even this stubble burning is going on. So I think what we definitely need is an urban water policy which will take into account the urban water resources, how they need to be managed, what are the demands that urban water areas makes, and how those demands are going to be satisfied. No, you can't. Every city cannot just demand that you build dams for us, and then we will not harvest rainwater. We will not protect our water bodies or rivers or streams. We will not treat our sewage and recycle it and reduce the demand. We will not do demand side management. But we just need water. That's what every city is doing today. Now that cannot be a smart water management. So So that all of those components has to be part of a very clearly defined national urban water policy, which will then also it has to be fit into the national water policy, which will take into account the overall water sector in the nation. But because national water policy is not able to focus that clearly on the urban water policy, urban water issues, we need both of them, which are connected with each other.
Certainly, yes. So you also just now mentioned about rainwater harvesting. Actually, this has been made mandatory for all new houses that are being constructed, um, and in several areas. So, is this actually a good step? Because I mean, not all households would be in a position to invest a lot of resources in having this sort of construction, or should the focus rather be on creation of rainwater harvesting for the private sector, for the industry bodies, etc. And associated with this question is, you drew our attention to the industries, the entire uh, so for example, the grey water management has to be in place. That will actually, that could perhaps help in solving some problems or some challenges that that the urban agriculture also faces. In fact, it could boost urban agriculture if we are managing the grey water. So is this a time to have the industrial responsibility, who are industrial responsibility towards water management, as we have corporate social responsibility? Should we have a water responsibility program that could alleviate some sort of to an extent the water challenges in the urban areas?
Right. Now, as far as the rainwater harvesting is concerned, see, we need to see what are our low-hanging fruits are. Now, if you look at it in the management parlance, low-hanging fruits essentially are big buildings, uh, government buildings. You take a city like Delhi, where its government owns very large number of buildings. The central government and the state government. Uh, there are railways, which is a big landlord, which has so many building and land. There are big institutions with schools, colleges, malls, multiplexes, metro. So these are the low-hanging fruits. How many of the government buildings have rainwater harvesting system? Functioning rainwater harvesting system. Do we even know? Most of them don't have. Even Ministry of Water Resources doesn't have. So, we have been talking, we are paying lip service to rainwater harvesting, and, coming out with notifications like that all new buildings should have. Why, all these, what I counted, the cinemas, multiplexes, and malls, and embassies, and colleges, and schools, and government buildings, and metros, and all of these have the larger area, larger potential, and the resources to put in rainwater harvesting system in place. All of these has the resources. So these are the bodies which should set an example of ensuring complete rainwater harvesting. If we do that, very large part of the rainwater harvesting potential we would have already achieved in cities, in Delhi, for example, and most other cities. So this is the way forward, I feel, that all these buildings and this kind of larger buildings, and then there are, of course, multi-story buildings and colonies, some of the colonies. So, smaller households, you are right, may not have the resources, all of them. But these are the institutions which have all of them. And these are the low-hanging fruits which should be used. Coming to the grey water, there are two kinds of grey water, of course. One is the uh, urban sewage, sewage, domestic sewage, and other is the industrial effluents. As far as industrial effluent is concerned, there should be, they are seriously problematic in the sense that they are also, in many cases, toxic. And wherever they are released, they actually destroy ecosystem and available water in those areas also. So there is definitely no doubt that the law of the land says that there can be no release of untreated effluents. And that's going on left, right, and center all over India even today. So we need to stop that. The governance of the pollution control needs to improve to ensure respect for the law of the land. There have been so many court cases and so many court pronouncements, even they don't get implemented. So we need to go for that. As far as urban sewage is concerned, again, the law of the land again says untreated sewage cannot be released. But all cities are doing, no cities has the capacity. And even where there are capacities, they are not functioning. The percentage functioning of the how much sewage percentage of its capacity the sewage treat STPs are performing, you will find they are mostly less than 50%. They will give different reasons. We don't have power. Sometimes sewage doesn't reach them. Sometimes they don't have resources or chemicals and so on. But these are actually alibis. What we really need, that we need to give them a time that, okay, now you have 3 years, 2 years. Within next 2 years, you have to ensure 100% treatment. And most importantly, we need to go for decentralized STPs. Today, we are doing what we are doing. We create sewage, then we pump that sewage to a centralized location. And then we do some treatment and then release that water. And then that's also centralized and then go into the river. So because it is centralized, the treated water cannot be used in a centralized way. What we need is a decentralized STPs, which will treat the local sewage in a decentralized way and create a resource which can be recycled locally in the parks or cities and roads and industries and so on. So this is the, more and more we need to go for decentralized STPs, and even the current STPs that are there, they need to be ensured that they're functioning. We have been telling that every STP should have a citizen committee, monitoring committee, which will have right to go and inspect, ask questions, and look for whether it's functioning properly or not. So, we need a very significant change in the way we are governing the sewage and the effluent, industrial effluent, because that's a luxury we have been living with, not
Sure.
dealing with them.
Thank you very much, sir, for that. Sir, could you enlighten us as to what are the best practices which can be emulated for water governance, be it from within India or from countries faced with similar challenges like India, and are the peripheries, are the rural areas good enough to manage the water resources through their indigenous mechanisms, or there or has there to be some sort of a hand holding, and this hand holding should come from where? From the civil society, or from the policy, or from technology? What kind of a nexus needs to be there in place to handhold, if handholding is required, or if indigenous water management is sufficient, and can those management practices be emulated in the urban areas?
There are a lot of questions in that one question. I'll try and answer them. One is, of course, you were asking for best practices. Now, there are best practices available at different levels and scales. At the national level, I gave an example of USGS. It's a good example where we have an institution, we need an institution which will just gather information and put it out in public domain. We need to change the way our rainfall is being more forecasted and reported. We need much more hydrological system based rainfall forecasting and rainfall reporting, because essentially that's where the water will travel in a hydrological unit, whether it is watershed or sub-basin or a basin level. So that's how both reporting and the forecasting needs to happen. In terms of the governance, the groundwater is essentially aquifer-based resource, local resource. Aquifers are local essentially. So each aquifer needs to have a management, separate governance. And so there has to be a decentralized bottom-up groundwater governance, and wherever that has been tried, it has succeeded. Even a state-level project, World Bank did an Andhra Pradesh project, groundwater governance, and where they equip the local community to understand what is their water budget, and they told them, okay, this is your water budget based on your rainfall, your groundwater levels, how much water, what are the levels and how much it is changing. So they said, okay, now this is your water budget. And so they actually changed the cropping pattern. They said that we don't have water for certain cropping patterns and we can't go for it. So there has been success stories like that. In Arwari Basin, where Tarun Bharat Sangh has been working, there is a different set of success stories where, a parliament was created. First, a river was rejuvenated through local water governance unit, which was a river parliament. Representative from each village would come to the river parliament and collectively decide how the river is to be managed. So this is another, good example, best practice example. In terms of the pollution control, and reservoir control, for example, or environment management, again, each has different kind of examples. For example, we need to change the governance of our pollution control boards, and we need to have a role for the local people, community, at the community level. For example, I'll give you an example. We had India Rivers Week is organizing every year. We do some debate on water issues, and this year we are doing on sand mining. And last week we had a North Zone webinar where I don't know if you heard her name, Durga Shakti Nagpal was speaking. She's a remarkable woman, an IAS who took on the sand mafia in a very first appointment in Greater Noida. And she went after sand mafia, a dreaded sand mafia, which no officer has dared in India so far. But she did that. And so she spoke at our sand mining webinar, and she said very clearly that the local communities, because it is they who get affected if the unsustainable sand mining happens. It's the local people who get affected if the river is polluted. If the local people affected if there is a flood there, or so whatever the problems in the water bodies in the rivers, the people who get affected needs to be an important stakeholder in your governance, in your decision making process, in your monitoring, in your achieving compliance systems. So that governance needs to change. Today we have a top-down governance and management, and which is actually have no place for those stakeholders at the bottom level. So that needs to change in every different way, whether it is sand mining, monitoring and compliance and decision making, whether it is pollution. In terms of sewage, it needs to happen. For example, at each STP level, there has to be a management committee, as I said. And that management committee should have 50% member from outside the government and 50% from the government. And then that committee should have a right to inspect, ask questions, and find out how the STP is performing, and recommend remedial ways when it is not functioning properly. So, or even punitive ways. So, we need to, and all of this needs to become statutory. The role for the lowest level of stakeholders in river management, in pollution management, in rainwater management, in sand mining management, in biodiversity management, everywhere there is to be at the beginning, there has to be a role for them in the governance. And we need to change governance that way. If we do that, I think most of our problems in water sector would have been solved.
Certainly. Thank you very much, sir. I would now go to the question and answers from questions from the audience. There are a few questions, sir, and I would like to pose them to you. One question is from Ms. Kirti Sharma. I'm sorry. She requests you to talk about the local governance in the context of water management, particularly the rural informal institutions, and She's also asking about what do you think is the impact of climate change on water governance in rural areas? So yes, the focus of her question is on the rural areas and water management here.
Right. Now, I think rural areas is the issue, is the place where the governance needs to actually start. And for various different component of governance that I listed earlier, in water governance, which are components of water governance, each of them needs to start at the rural level. And that needs to be not only in the lip service way. For example, when we say that in environment, EIA and environment clearance process, we need a role for the people. So what they did, they had, okay, we will have public hearing. What happens in public hearing? Only a box get tick marked. We don't want box tick marking exercises, because, for example, in that public hearing, how does the public hearing get held? Who speaks? Who doesn't speak? And suppose if everyone at the public hearing were to say, this project, we don't want this project, this is not acceptable, and there are better alternatives available, even then the project goes ahead, because public hearing is only a box tick marking exercise. It has no real decisive role in decision making. That needs, in rural areas, the people needs to have a role in groundwater management, in rainwater management, in local water bodies management, in flood management, in various different, sand mining, if it is happening close to their areas. If there is a river, then the fisheries management in that river. So, different water sector issues, the local people needs to have a role, and it needs to have a very key role. It can't be just box tick marking affair. And so that's very important. Her second part of her question about how the climate change is affecting, I think climate change is affecting in a very big way, because the most of the rural areas firstly depend on agriculture, and their agriculture is in a very large extent dependent on rainwater, and that rainfall patterns are changing in a big way. If you saw the rainfall pattern in 2019 monsoon and 2020 monsoon also, what we saw is that the rainfall initially, the setting was on date, but then there was a big gap in the second half of June, in the first half of July. There was very little rainfall, which happened last year also and this year also. So now that is the crucial period when the farmer has sown, rain-fed farmer has sown his crop. So that's one part of it. And then when it poured heavily in August and September. Last year it was even in September. So this kind of rainfall pattern is having a big impact on the local people. And then the floods, the extent, in the intensity and the frequency of floods are increasing, which are again mainly affecting the rural areas. So these are major impact. There are impacts in terms of the temperature change, which also has in turn impact on the crops and environment in the rural areas. So there are large number of, in the coastal area, there are additional impacts in terms of the seawater ingress, the cyclones, and the way the rainfall pattern is changing there. So all of that is, in the coastal areas, even more severe impacts are there of the climate change.
Thank you, sir. One question is, what are your views on citizen governance in urban areas where a good chunk of people waste water from the ROs, and they don't feel the need to save it? Companies have developed the technologies to purify drinking water, but they fail to minimize the wastage of water. There's no advertisement related to how do you utilize the wastewater that is coming out of the ROs. In this context, how urban water citizen governance can be highlighted, and what ways can be adopted to be able to control this?
Yeah, it's a very good question actually, and we really need a much greater citizen involvement in urban water governance actually. And In fact, when Aam Aadmi Party came to power in Delhi, they had actually promised that there will be ward level committees in Delhi to, for water management in local area and so on. It didn't happen actually. It's a big disappointment, but we hope they will do it in the remaining part of the term. But what, that coming back to her question, for example, RO water. The reality is that an NGT, no less than the National Green Tribunal, has said that the most cities in India don't need RO. We don't need RO actually. Our water is not that bad, and RO doesn't help. So, but an NGT has actually said that RO should be banned. But the Ministry of Environment is not able to take action on that. So there have been hearing after hearing getting postponed. So this is just an example. But why people are not working for conservation of water in urban areas? One major reason is that they don't feel this is their problem because they are not part of governance. When I am not part of governance, some other body, Delhi Jal Board in Delhi is supplying water. What I am doing, I ask sometimes when I go to schools for lecturing, I ask children, where does their water come from? And most of them will say it comes from the tap. They don't know where does the water come from. They only think they know it comes, you open the tap and you get the water. And where does their sewage goes? Nobody knows. It goes into the flush. Now this is the level of literacy in water sector in urban areas. Most area people. So people need to really know their water issue. They need to be involved. And that governance, that's what I said, the governance needs to change. For example, if each ward, there was a water committee, which will involve, it can be sub-ward level also. But at least at the ward level, we need to begin with, which will, know where does that ward get water from? Where does the sewage of that ward goes? How does the rainwater and stormwater management happen in that ward? How they can, how much water is getting used? How many citizens are there? So how much per capita water is getting used? How can this be changed and reduced? What is the groundwater situation in that ward? How much groundwater is getting used? How much rainwater is getting harvested? How many parks are there? Where does the park get irrigated from? What is the source of their water? I mean, so many issues. Now, if there is a ward level literacy, ward level involvement of the citizen, and they will ask all these questions, they get involved in all these questions, and that then will lead to questioning that, okay, I need to change my own governance also. I need to change the way I use water. I need to ensure I waste less water. And how I can, so I mean, it's not rocket science how to reuse the RO water. For example, you can use the RO water for watering their plants. You can use RO water, for example, watering your vehicles. You can use RO water for watering most of your floors, particularly outside your home at least. Even you can do inside, but at least outside you can begin with. Where you have steps or you have a terrace, or what if you have angan in front of your house, all of that can be used, washed using RO water. So there are a number of uses one can do, and where we can reduce the other fresh water. So, but the key problem is because I don't know, I am not involved, and I have no knowledge. So people are not getting. So we really need a major change in the way the urban water is governed, and citizens need to have a greater role, and they need to demand greater role, more and more citizens. So that's the way forward for changing urban water governance.
Thank you, sir. I will just ask you one last question before I invite Dr. Arjun Kumar to open his comments. So there's a question by Tanvi who says that in some places, water from road cracks gets wasted daily and nobody cares to complain, or we can say people don't know whom to contact. Shouldn't you think the way COVID and Swachh Bharat has been campaigned, water should be campaigned to let people know whom to contact at local point to prevent such wastage, public wastage of water?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what she's suggesting is that there are leakage in the pipelines, and that's getting
Yes.
that water is getting wasted. Absolutely. I
Hmm.
think that what I said, if citizens were involved in ward level upwards. So if it starts at what level, then they will also get involved at a higher level in a federal way. So if it happens, then people will know ward level. There will be at least there will be ward level committee, and you know that you have to contact that ward level committee to tell them that okay, this is the problem in the water issue. This is where the leakage is happening. This is where the water is getting wasted. So I think and we really need. She's right. If we can do this kind of campaign, whether it is Swachh Bharat or COVID, we can surely do for water, which is so important in our lives, and we should be doing absolutely. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. I invite Dr. Arjun to come up. Yes. Arjun, over to you. We are sharp at 1 hour now. If you could keep your comments brief.
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Arjun, yes.
Thank you, Simi, and thank you so much, Himanshu Thakkar sir, for coming here and sharing so many issues in water governance. Really, the arrays which water is touching upon to our institution and to different uses is very huge. And since I really highlighted the latter part that the integrated water literacy, communication, research analysis, technology, all these things are really very important and needs to be mainstreamed. And our partner India Water Portal have been doing a lot of good work regarding this continuously for many years, really
Absolutely.
highlighting all these
They are
issues.
doing great work. Absolutely.
Yes. In entire the water debate, the whole chain. This also brings us to one another question, very academic. How do we see water? Is water a public good or private good? How do we are we seeing? Especially the questions are coming. Who is responsible? What are our approach towards this? And sir has really mentioned about the national urban water policy. So what all can be the ways towards it? How are other countries doing in that respect? Is any state government leading in this? If you, sir, your views. And sir, you also mentioned that there are many plethora of organizations uh, like CWC, then Water This Board and Jal Board. Many agencies looking into these many things. How this can be coordinated well for the really for conservation and service delivery of good water for different purposes. So, what are your experiences in terms of dams, which you have really focused, and what the ecological and human things it is leading to? Your views. Lastly, sir, I really wanted to know from you. You have highlighted many things on the aspect of Central Water Commission, and many things of capacity and many things. So, what are your recommendation towards the Central Water Commission, and what can be done to strengthen those things? Sir, over to you. Thank you once again.
Oh, you asked so many questions. I'll
Yes.
take
Sir,
another hour to reply. Actually,
sir, you can choose to answer. Yes, please.
1 hour. I have 1 hour.
No, sir, I'm saying you can choose to answer. Yes.
Okay. I'll try and do. So first your question is how do we look at water? So water has different dimensions, but I think we need to realize that most importantly, water is a common property resource. It's an ecosystem good. It's part of the ecosystem. In fact, wherever we look, when in human beings look for life anywhere in the world, planet, or anywhere outside, they look for water. The first sign of life they see is the water. If the water is there, there is a possibility of life. So and that's possible because it's part of the ecosystem. We cannot forget that part. Whatever you do with water, you are impacting ecosystem. So we need to be mindful of that fact. So I mean, beyond that, obviously there are issues of how do we use and manage and govern water and so on. Water has to be seen as a right as far as the minimum needs of the people are concerned, and that has to be the top priority. Uh, mm, Only after you satisfy everybody's minimum need, then you can talk about some people's luxury needs and so on, the demand in the society. So there are different ways, but I'll just stop at that. We need to really, I mentioned Central Water Commission and other institutions. The point is that we really need a major change in the way our institutional water institutions exist. And we need major reform in the Central Water Commission. The Central Water Commission is doing too many things now, and it's not able to do a lot of those things in the way it needs to be done properly. And that's why the previous a few years back, a committee was set up for a restructuring of the Central Water Commission. Its report is there, Mirsha committee. I wish that committee was a little more radical in its thinking, but it has come out with a set of recommendation. We need a public debate on what kind of water institutions we need, and what kind of reform the Central Water Commission and the other institutions need to go through. It's not the Central Water Commission. We need a reform also in the Pollution Control Board, I said, the Central and State Pollution Control Board, or the Urban Water Governance, in every way. So we need major reforms in all of that. We need a change in the legal system also, to create a more statutory role for the citizens and the people at the rural and the urban area. So these changes, all of these are required, which will include institutional change also. One example I gave is of the USGS, which is a very good example in the sense that I was impressed. The way they actually not only collect information, but they ensure that they always get good quality information, because they have no axe to grind. They are not part of any development or any projects or any dams or anything. No, they are only ensuring that the right reliable information should be collected and put out in public domain. So we need that kind of institutions. We need a different institutions which is actually govern our rivers. Actually, we have no institution in India which is looking at governing our rivers. Actually, we only govern water, but we don't govern rivers. So this kind of all of these institutional changes are required, and major changes are required to get a greater role for the citizens at the bottom of the pyramid. I mean, at the grassroots level. So, and there are a lot of, I gave some success stories and good examples, test cases. We need to go for that. And incidentally, climate change is actually giving us that opportunity to break from the past, to change things. And so that we need, as far as the dams are concerned, see, we have built already 5,000 plus big dams in India. And if you see what the dams were supposed to do and what they are doing, there is a big problem there. Uh, in terms of course, the dams are a big issue in terms of the social and environmental impacts. But if the society collectively decides in a democratic, informed way that we need a certain dam, then it should go ahead to do it in a wholehearted way, taking care of the social and environmental issues, but also ensuring that the dams do perform the role that they are supposed to perform, both in terms of providing water, providing services, and providing the efficient, effective use that we are able to put to them. If we can't put them to efficient, effective use, and they don't provide the services that they were set out to provide, and that's unfortunately the situation. Whether you take irrigation, whether it is you take the use of the storage space, whether you take hydropower generation, there are major issues there. We have been highlighting that. There is no time in a year. Otherwise, I would have highlighted how is the performance of each of these subsector. But there's a major problems there. And the biggest problem is that we are not ready to do post facto assessments. And hence we are not ready to learn lessons. This is also in terms of the flood disaster that they are creating. I mean, this year, Sardar Sarovar Dam suddenly released so much water, which it did not have to release. If it had released slowly, earlier, it would have created no disaster, and instead it suddenly released between 29th of August and 2nd of September. Every day it released more than 10 lakh cusecs of water. And it created a massive disaster in the downstream villages and the towns like Bharuch and Ankleshwar. And that was a completely avoidable disaster. It was a wrong operation of the dam. And this happens year after year after year. And where is the accountability? We are not even doing post facto assessments. I've been last year National Disaster Management Authority organized a meeting, one day national conference on reservoir operation, and I said, for after every such disaster we must have an independent credible assessment as to what happened, what was the problem, what was the mistake, who is responsible, how we can fix accountability, and how we can learn lessons so that tomorrow we don't repeat that tomorrow, next year, and year after that. So these are the, I think, major issues. Our institutions need to change also in this respect. We need to have capacity to learn lessons and make changes where necessary.
Absolutely. In fact, the inability or the lack of interest in pursuing such post facto assessments is one of the reason why, which you highlighted in the beginning of your lecture, was that we have kept our water information secret, and there's
Yes,
a
yes,
lot of gap on the information. So
absolutely.
we definitely have to work towards that, to in order to actually save and protect our vulnerable communities, especially. Apart from that, the entire population is stands at risk. That is not a problem, or that cannot be doubted. But we have to be very proactive, and vigorously we need to support our vulnerable communities. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, there's a question. What was the name of the national conference you just mentioned? It was the India Water Week, or was
No,
what
no.
was it? That was
Which one?
you
One was
recently mentioned, where
I yes,
Miss Durga
mentioned
Shakti
one
Nagpal.
was about the National Disaster Management Authority. So
NDMA.
that was about the reservoir operation, that was in October 2019. After the monsoon, they had a reservoir operation national conference on it. Other one I mentioned was about the India Rivers Week, where we do, we are having sand mining related dialogues. We had North Zone last year. We will have South Zone on Saturday, and West Zone next week, and East Zone after that, and the national one on 28th of November. So that's in part of India Rivers Week.
Okay. Okay. So, is the information available on the website so
Yeah,
that people
if you
can?
look for India Rivers Forum, either
Okay.
on India Rivers Forum, either on Facebook or on the Twitter, or you can look at, you can write to us. Our SANDRP Sandrup organization is there. We are
Mm.
also there on Facebook and Twitter. You can write to us and we will provide the necessary information.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Arjun, are we good to conclude, or do you have some final points to make? I think we are beyond time. So,
Okay.
Yes, we will also provide sir's link and organization link on our webpage so that if anyone has to
oh,
contact sir, especially on India's River Week, sir, we would also be very much interested to contribute and participate.
Absolutely.
mm,
Yes,
You're most welcome.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
all
It will
the
be
sure,
very nice.
sure.
we can also
I'll send the information. Yeah.
yes,
Absolutely, sir. Looking forward.
I'll
Yeah.
send the information to you all. Yeah.
yes. Thank you.
Okay, then.
Then
Thank
we
you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Himanshu. And it was
Uh,
such a pleasure and so informative. I mean, as you could see, we could continue with our conversations on this very critical issue of water governance, and the um, road to proper water governance is long. And with the optimism that we have proper water governance, and it is managed well for the benefit, or for for sustainable development, With these few words, I would like to thank Mr. Himanshu, India Water Portal, our media partner, and Terry School of Advanced Studies, our organizing partner, Team Impri, and to all the audience watching us live here on Zoom as well as on Facebook. Thank you very much for joining us, and keep yourself abreast with the happenings of the State of the Environment #Planet Talks with me, Simi Mehta, and hope to see you again in the next event. Thank you very much and have a very good day.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much
Have
for
a nice day.
thank you very
Thank you,
much
sir.
for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
It was a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.